This is CBC Here and Now.
City of St. John says cuts to the subsidy it provides to Metrobus will be coming in the next budget.
Proposed budget cuts that we will ultimately vote on December 7th will have a real impact on some of the most vulnerable residents in this city right now during a global pandemic, and I can't support it.
I'm Jeremy Eaton. I'll have the details of that coming up on Here and Now.
Well, get ready for another ride on the temperature roller coaster this week.
The possible cost of shifting resources to prepare for COVID-19.
There shouldn't have been an impact to the cardiac surgeries over that period of time, especially for the low cases that were in Newfoundland.
Coming up on Here and Now.
Good evening and welcome to Here and Now. I'm Anthony Germain.
And I'm Carolyn Stokes. Those stories are coming up just ahead, but first to the West Coast.
Well, this was the scene around noon in Deer Lake, this stretch along Commerce Street with the Tim Hortons, A&W, and Riffs. If you've been there, you know the spots. Normally lots of traffic, but today much different. Shoppers noticeably absent from that area. And at schools today in the town, it was pretty much the same. We've been taking attendance this week on Here and Now, and in Deer Lake, most parents have been keeping their kids at home. This after a cluster of new COVID cases in the region, including a case at the elementary school. Our Colleen Connors spoke with a junior high student who did go to school today. Normally, there are 24 students in Cara Pinkston's class. Today, Cara only had 4 classmates.
It was kind of stressful because I didn't know really how to think of it, but I think everything's going well, and we're still having classes like normal.
Are there many students in the classes?
Well, I think I wasn't here for Monday and Tuesday, but there's 5 people today, and before there wasn't very many. But I think now that there was 0 new cases yesterday, then I think there's a few more people today. Well, it definitely feels different because in a normal classroom today, you wouldn't really expect only 5 people, but I think otherwise it was like pretty normal.
Are you scared at all of getting sick?
Well, I'm a bit cautious. I know I need to be more cautious and everything now because like there could be COVID in the school. But I know that if I do get COVID, then I should be fine because it's just a flu. I feel like it's better to be able to be like in person school because you get to see all your friends and your teacher like in person, and I feel like that's just a bit easier for the teachers and everything.
Well, across the province, there are reports about parents choosing to keep their children home from school despite assurances from public health that the schools are safe. Joining me now is the head of the English School District, Tony Stack. What is your message to those parents who are afraid to send their children to school right now?
I know that there is a concern and anxiety that exists in some of our communities. But I can reassure you, we've had great liaison with public health, and we continue to follow that sound advice that they've been given us. So, Dr. Fitzgerald has told us that there'll be bumps in the road along the way, and we're confident that as it currently stands, there's no need to alter our school operations.
And what happens if the situation takes a turn for the worse and the schools have to shut down again? Are we ready to switch to online learning right away?
Absolutely. So in fact, right now at one of the class cohorts in Elwood Elementary, they are de facto under scenario 3. And for that group of students who are the majority of that class are under contact tracing, that particular class is really doing virtual learning with a teacher under the guidelines outlined in scenario 3. All of our schools are prepared to adopt that stance. We get stronger and stronger every day in preparation. Our schools are prepared to pivot. We've practiced this. We've got professional learning behind it. And obviously, the longer we can stave off this virus, hopefully stave it off forever, but if we have to pivot and adopt to a scenario 2 or 3 model, we're prepared.
And what's the status of the Chromebooks that are supposed to be made available to some students?
So they are starting to roll out, in fact. The Chromebooks are coming in as we speak. Now, these are intended for grades 7 through 12. we are very hopeful that we will have Chromebooks out before the Christmas break.
Interesting. So some schools in the province now in scenario 3, according to the boss at the school district. Well, health officials continue to closely monitor the COVID situation as it unfolds in Deer Lake. And another case on the West Coast to announce today. Here now is Peter Cowan joins us live now. So Peter, what do we know about this latest case?
Anthony, it is a close contact from an existing case. We got that reassurance today from the Chief Medical Officer of Health that there is no evidence of any sort of widespread community transmission. It's a woman who's in her 60s in the Western Health Region. And I guess the good news in all of this is that it is not a student in one of the schools, because that's been the big concern that we've heard ever since it was first announced that a student at the elementary school in Deer Lake was the first student to test positive since in-person classes resumed in September. The Chief Medical Officer of Health said today that everyone who is a close contact of that student has now been tested. She said more than about 30 people from the school are considered close contacts and isolating, and none of them have tested positive.
I believe there was some that had to be retested, not because of any positivity or anything like that, but just from technical reasons. And yeah, we've had no positives in that group.
Now, they are still going to need to be in quarantine because it is still possible for them to develop the disease later, even though they tested negative now. And we have seen the concern there that even though the schools are all open again, a lot of parents are just deciding to keep their kids home. And the reassurance today, not just from the school board that we heard before, but from the top health and political figures in this province is it is safe, and they are encouraging parents to send their kids to school.
People are not sending their children to school. I think they should pause and take a deep breath. And I understand their anxieties, but they should have every confidence in Dr. Fitzgerald and her public health team that have proven, that have earned their stripes, that they implemented these protocols with the safety of the children as the #1 priority.
Premier Andrew Furey said that the good news is the cohorting system that they've been using has now been proven to work in this scenario. As the fear of COVID-19 grows, so are the number of briefings. We heard the Premier announce today that they are going back to thrice weekly briefings instead of just one a week. He said that's nothing that you need to be afraid of, but they just wanted to use the opportunity to make sure people are informed. Reporting live from the newsroom, I'm Peter Cowan for Here and Now.
I thought I'd give you a little bit of an update on that snowfall total from yesterday. Added another 5 centimeters of snow since last night, and bringing the record for the previous 2 days was 70.6. So we definitely broke that yesterday afternoon in Happy Valley Goose Bay, or yesterday evening rather. Now it is the second highest snowfall, 2-day snowfall event since 1942. So certainly a good one, and it was a great day to dig out today with plenty of sunshine across the board. We are starting to see that increasing cloud though now for the island, and some flurries are developing along the west coast. That will generally continue as we head through the overnight tonight, but those temperatures were much cooler today across the board, only hovering around the 0-degree mark for St. John's, -3 in Corner Brook. And then we do have those cooler temperatures up through Labrador, and a significant wind chill as well, feeling more like -17 in Happy Valley Goose Bay, and those wind chills fairly cold across the island as well. But there is a little bit of a warm up on the way. I'll have all those details coming up.
Thanks, Ashley. A grieving family is raising questions about the cost of preparing for COVID-19. This after unexpectedly losing a loved one. 64-year-old Bob Colburn died after his open heart surgery was delayed by almost 5 months. Now, his wife and daughter are calling for change. Here now's Mark Quinn reports.
In 2019, Bob Colburn was an active man, and he appeared to be healthy when he was put on a wait list for elective surgery. He was scheduled for open-heart surgery in May, but the pandemic changed that plan. Last winter, like thousands of others, his surgery was canceled to make room for an expected wave of COVID cases. As Colburn waited to be rebooked, his condition deteriorated. By fall 2020, Colburn was fighting fatigue, shortness of breath, and indigestion. His wife says he couldn't walk the length of their driveway.
When we got to the end of September, his symptoms were getting worse to the point that one day he was just sitting on the couch.
Colburn convinced her husband to make the long drive from their central Newfoundland home in Point Leamington to St. John's. He was admitted to hospital and scheduled to have surgery on October 6th, but that surgery didn't go as planned. Efforts to keep him alive continued for 2 days until October 8th.
So basically, we were told we could visit, and we had some hard decisions to make. 4 o'clock that day, we let him go.
Colburn's daughter says his family fully expected him to survive and now believes the long wait for surgery contributed to her father's death. She says elective surgeries shouldn't have been delayed.
I think this is an essential surgery that there shouldn't have been an impact to the cardiac surgeries over that period of time, especially for the low cases that were in Newfoundland. People are losing their lives because of this delay.
It's excruciating for Jean Colburn to speak about the loss of her husband of 45 years, but she's doing it because she hopes it will help others.
So I just don't want another family to go through what we just went through.
Eastern Health offered its condolences to the family but says it can't comment for privacy reasons. The health authority says 183 people are waiting for heart surgery in Newfoundland and Labrador. Mark Quinn, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, there is a sign tonight that the relationship between the Newfoundland and Labrador government and doctors in this province may be improving. The Medical Association says government has agreed to meet and talk about negotiating a new collective agreement. Here Now, Cease Hare has that story.
What a difference a year makes. This time last year, doctors said they felt disrespected, saying the health minister was giving them the runaround when they were trying to start contract talks.
His assertion was that it was really Minister of Finance that was responsible for negotiating, which has been the history. A few weeks later, we met with Minister Osborne of Finance, who said that no, it was Health that was responsible for negotiating. And so then Health told us they were not ready yet.
This past summer, unable to get a meeting, the Medical Association made a plea for the new Premier to fix the broken relationship between doctors and the Health Department. Now that acrimony is just a memory, because next week there's a meeting to kickstart negotiations on a new contract to replace the one that expired more than 3 years ago.
Since that time, there's a long list of unaddressed issues. Problems facing healthcare in this province have only gotten worse.
Powell says the main issue is recruitment. Things need to change in the contract to fix the doctor shortage. Their poll shows 90,000 people in this province don't have a family doctor.
These patients are forced to rely on the emergency room to see a doctor, or else they don't see a doctor at all. This results in increased costs to the healthcare system, no continuity of care for these patients, and poor health outcomes.
And part of the problem, she says, is lost opportunities. Their poll of medical students at MUN shows 85% have never been approached by a recruiter from this province.
I heard stories from people that they would go to recruitment fairs and the table from Newfoundland and Labrador would be empty, but there would be a table from the Annapolis Valley. There would be somebody from New Brunswick.
Powell says good recruitment isn't just about pay. It's about adequately supporting overworked doctors with things like on-call obligations and locums. But it needs immediate action, she says, not just to replace doctors that'll be leaving and retiring, but to deal with the glaring doctor shortage now. Cease Hare, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, the province is once again feeling the pressures of a global pandemic because of what's happening elsewhere. And despite Premier Andrew Furey saying he wants to avoid another shutdown, some people can't help but worry about one happening. And for some business owners, what happens over the next days and weeks could make or break them. Ryan Cook reports.
With small spikes in cases around the province in recent weeks, people are feeling a little bit tense, and perhaps nobody more than those who work in the fitness sector. If the province does slide back to level 3, they're likely to be the first ones feeling the pinch. Gyms, fitness centers, and yoga studios would be ordered closed again like they were from March until June. Jill Holden of Moto Yoga has been there, and she doesn't want to have to go back.
It was difficult, and thankfully we got through it. Having to go through it for a longer period of time again, I'm not sure that that's, really viable in the long run, because these subsidies that we're able to take advantage of are really helping, but I know that that likely won't last forever.
At today's briefing, Premier Andrew Furey was clear. We don't want to go there again, not like Ontario and not like Nova Scotia.
We don't want to have to close our businesses here. We want to protect the freedoms that we've come to enjoy while in line with public health measures, of course. We want to avoid a full lockdown that we're seeing across the country.
Small business owners like Heather Murphy at Islander Athletics are doing their part, knowing that they could be among the first to shut down. Any members who have even been in contact with anyone who's traveled within the Atlantic bubble are being asked to stay away for 2 weeks.
We've taken it a couple extra steps further, and I know that's on us, and I've seen a lot of other studios doing the same kinds of things to really try and prevent a second closure from happening. So it's hopeful. I'm optimistic that we'll have to be able to avoid it.
Beyond business, Jill Holden believes that everyone has an obligation.
Without question, just follow what's being asked. And the more that we can comply and move through this together, we can move out of it the way that we did in the summer. So yeah, just act socially responsibly.
Ryan Cook, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, for the first time, the City of St. John's is speaking about upcoming cuts to Metrobus. A letter sent to staff last week said the subsidy for the public transit system would be slashed by about $800,000, and it's a decision that not all councillors agree with. Here now's Jeremy Eaton has that story.
While the wheels on the bus won't be stopping, they will be spinning a lot less in 2021. Ridership is down, mainly because Memorial University students aren't in the classroom and more people are working from home. Plus, the city says it needs to find savings due to Snowmageddon and COVID-19. That means it will cut the amount of cash dedicated to public transit.
The way that Metrobus is looking right now at finding those savings is by moving to a reduced service level schedule. It's basically going to be the summer schedule.
That means fewer buses, longer waits at the bus stop. For example, on routes 1, 2, 3, and 10, instead of 15 minutes in between buses, it will now be a 30-minute wait. Over the summer, the federal government offered up money to help cities with their transit systems, but the province never applied for it. Lane says it wouldn't have affected this decision.
We're also looking at challenging budgets ahead, 22, 23, as the economy shifts. Cuts we're looking at today have more to do with looking forward at budgets, whereas the funding would have been available based on 2020 numbers.
But this move isn't a smooth ride for fellow councillor Maggie Burton. The proposed budget cuts that we will ultimately vote on December 7th will have a real impact on some of the most vulnerable residents in this city right now during a global pandemic, and I can't support it. For many people, this is their lone mode of vehicle transportation. Cutting the service affects those who need it the most. As a society, I think during the pandemic we've become more aware of what it's like to be someone who is a low-wage worker at a service industry job, for example. Those hours are often shift-based, and if we cut back the hours, then people will have less options for getting home, for example, at the end of the night.
This decision has me torn up, honestly. I don't like that we are doing this, that we have to do this.
We want them to use the bus. We care about them using the bus. We want people to get around safely, and ultimately we need to put money behind those statements in order for it to work.
The full extent of the cuts won't be known until the budget is released on December the 7th, meaning a lot of riders on the buses here behind me are just going to have to wait until then. But with winter fast approaching, a lot of people waiting for the bus may be stuck out in the cold. Jeremy Eaton, CBC News, St. John's.
And other vehicles facing city cuts coming to the city of St. John. The St. John's Regional Fire Department's union tweeted late this afternoon that it has been told that daily staffing is going to be cut by 2 firefighters, meaning Ladder 3 will be removed from service. So that will leave St. John's metro area with just 1 ladder truck. The tweets call the move, quote, a reckless decision. The CBC has tried to contact the city on this, and we are still waiting for a response. Well, police in Happy Valley Goose Bay say they've made what could be their biggest drug bust yet. All of this was seized last week from a home in the community. Police took almost 1 kilogram of cocaine and the same amount of crack cocaine. They also found more than 3,000 patches that they believe contain illegal drugs. Those are being sent for further testing now. Now, we did mention this bust on Here and Now on Friday, but police offered to show the drugs today. The cocaine seized is worth more than $350,000.
I know, for example, that cocaine is a large problem in Labrador, and I've undertaken to community leaders that we would attack this problem, and this has been very successful thus far in mitigating some of that risk. That, like I said, is a fair amount of drugs and represents a lot of addiction and a lot of wellness on the part of, it's going to be very hard for people in the near future in order to obtain these drugs because of seizures like this.
Well, intimate partner violence is happening in this province. That's what the family of Julianne Hibbs wants you to know. She died 7 years ago at the hands of her ex-boyfriend. Today, a flag raising was held to mark the first 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, an international campaign aimed at eradicating abuse. Julianne's family says they're dealing with the emotional trauma of her murder every day. Her former boyfriend shot her and her new partner inside a CBS medical clinic in 2013. Julianne's parents say the sadness comes rushing back during events like this one held today, but they attend to share their daughter's story and message.
The most important thing is to make people aware that this stuff does happen. It doesn't just happen in California or New York. It happens in little old Newfoundland. It happens in little old CBS Newfoundland. And it can happen to anyone at any time.
We've got some snow on the way tonight for parts of the west coast as well as the south coast. I'll have all those details in your full forecast coming up.
Ashley is here now with a look at the weather forecast. Another sunshiny day in St. John's. It was gorgeous.
It was gorgeous.
Cold, but gorgeous.
Freezing. Yeah. Walked out this afternoon. Needed a little bit more than a light jacket today, certainly, but a little wind, which was nice this afternoon. Let's take a look at the satellite radar. Not a whole lot happening. We did see those clouds on the increase through the day, though, along the west coast and most of the island, really. And we're starting to see we're starting to see flurries as well. So temperatures today were chilly, and they're still cold. -3 in St. John's right now, -4 in Gander. Similar temperature for Corner Brook, and then into the minus double digits for Lab City as we speak, and that wind chill feeling more like -19 for you. That's generally where you'll be sitting overnight tonight. This should be the coolest that it feels because temperatures are going to be on the increase as we head towards the morning hours, feeling more like -4 in Corner Brook, which is where you're sitting. So not much of a wind chill there. Not much of a wind chill there right now. As we head through the night tonight, we are going to see those flurries and light snow continue for the west, the north, and then along the south as well into further inland as you head into the early morning hours, though, because some of that warmer air is going to move in and likely change things over to showers. As far as totals go, this is where we'll be sitting by tomorrow morning. It's looking like anywhere from 5 to as much as 10 centimeters is possible, maybe a little bit more in those higher elevations. And really the only accumulation will be, for the south coast anyway, will be further inland and in those higher elevations as well. Otherwise, not looking at a whole lot going on, certainly in the east. St. John should stay partly to mostly cloudy tonight, -6 with southwesterlies, 15 to 20 kilometers per hour. The potential for a few flurries or showers towards the early morning hours for Gander, and that's because those temperatures, like I said, are going to climb up above 0 as we head into the early morning hours. -12 for Lab City tonight, same thing for Happy Valley, Goose Bay. Best chance of seeing some flurries will be in the west and along the strait, with those winds staying a little bit breezy as well. Now tomorrow afternoon, like I said, with those warmer temperatures, first part might see a few flurries in the east, and then that will quickly change over to the potential for some showers into the afternoon. And then some clearing along the west coast, and then likely going to stick with the potential for some showers and some drizzle in the early evening hours for the Avalon. Eventually that will clear out, but then another round of showers will move in for the south and the west as we head into the early morning hours on Friday, with some snow pushing in for Labrador. So temperatures tomorrow will be much nicer, back into where we should be sitting for normals for this time of year. 5 degrees in St. John's, winds out of the southwest, 20 to 40 kilometers per hour. Similar temperatures as we head towards central. Gander 4 degrees, and Grand Falls, Windsor 4 degrees as well. And then towards the coast, we're looking at temperatures anywhere from 1 to 4 degrees through the day. Winds will be generally light, though, out of the west, 10 to 15 kilometers per hour. Northern Peninsula, you should stay on the -2, so you should stay below 0 tomorrow. Some sunshine for the southeastern portions of Labrador. Mary's Harbour -4, winds generally about 20 to 30 kilometers per hour. And then again, the winds will shift for you in the west, anywhere from looking from southwesterlies to southerlies, and temperatures just around -9 for Lab City tomorrow afternoon, but plenty of sunshine for the rest of the Big Land. Heading through Friday, things will stay a little bit unsettled. We will see those warmer temperatures with the potential for some showers as well towards the strait, and flurries for Labrador. And then as we head into Saturday, this warm, well, at least milder air is going to stick around for most of the island. However, the Northern Peninsula will get into some of that cooler air, and it looks like we'll see the potential for a few showers and or flurries through the day. So here's where your temperatures are going to be sitting, back up into the double digits. 10 degrees in St. John's, 12 for Corner Brook, and then around 7 degrees for St. Anthony. And that's why we'll see showers on Friday. But as we head into Saturday, that's when those temperatures will start to dip. However, still going to stay mild for most of the island. 14 degrees in Corner Brook, and 13 in Gander, 11 in St. John's through the day on Saturday. But again, with that potential for some showers, nice and sunny up across the Big Land. -9 for Lab City. Taking a look at the next couple of days after that, Sunday looks like we'll stay warm again, or at least mild. However, with those temperatures dipping overnight, the potential for the rain changing over to some flurry activity and then hovering around the 0 degree mark on Monday. But it does look like it's going to get quiet for a few days after that. Similar story for both central and western Newfoundland as you see your temperatures into the teens and then back down to those single digits hovering near or just around the 0 degree mark for both Sunday and Monday. A little flurry activity expected along the west coast. And then for eastern Labrador, nice sunshine for the weekend and heading into the beginning of next week, albeit cold. And then same thing for Lab West, -11 looks like, and overnight lows dipping into those minus teens. Wanted to share this beautiful photo. Calm day in Conception Harbor. Bob shared that shot with us. Thank you so much. And if you have any weather photos to share with us, send them to nlphotos@cbc.ca.
It's being called the largest study of entry testing. More than 8,000 people arriving at Toronto Pearson's Airport were tested for COVID-19 when they landed, and then again after 7 and 14 days. Here's what that study found. Of the people who tested positive, 70% did so on their first test when they arrived. After a week, the total number of positive cases caught was almost 95%. Only an additional 5.6% of people tested positive after the 2 full weeks of quarantine. Dr. Merrick Smiha is the scientific director of McMaster Health Labs. He's in Hamilton. So what do these results tell you? Are we overdoing it with quarantine?
What we've certainly demonstrated is that 95% of the COVID is detectable either on landing or by day 7. And we were hoping that the day 7 would be the magic time where if we could show almost everybody who's going to get COVID is positive by then, ideally we'd be in future allowing such people out of quarantine.
I guess the challenge is you're still having 5% of people that haven't tested positive by that point. So the risk is they could be allowed to go out in the community, and even some of those people who tested negative upon entry, sometimes the concern that's been raised here is that that gives people a false sense of security. Hey, I have a negative test, maybe I don't need to be as strict.
Alberta is trying a similar sort of strategy of testing on arrival and testing on day 7, and they are allowing a modified quarantine even after 48 hours and certainly after 7 days. So I do think that almost all the risk, and when we say 5%, it's 5% of the positives, but only 1% of all of these passengers were positive. Of that 1%, 19 out of 20 could be detected by day 7. So I think it's mostly a good news story. It's not a perfect story, and it's certainly one where we're not the ones to set quarantine policy. We're providing data that the federal government and provincial governments will look at to ask in each setting what's an acceptable risk in terms of quarantine and the inconvenience versus the very, very low rate developing COVID after 7 days. And again, importantly, this is not symptom based. These are people who, regardless of symptoms, most of them are asymptomatic, who are developing a COVID.
Do you see point of entry testing as being a key part of the next phase of battling COVID-19 before we get a vaccine?
I do. And I think it's going to coexist with vaccine for 6 to 12 months. So imagine that, we're in February, we've rolled out a vaccine to some people, but we still have a lot of it going around. I think vaccination plus testing are complementary. I think you can also imagine, and as part of the Atlantic bubble, we're quite ahead of us in Ontario, where we've had constant transmission since about February. Where if the only way that you're going to get it is by importing it from other provinces or from other countries, then I think you're going to put that much more emphasis on protecting Newfoundland and Labrador from people who arrive there who are incubating it. So I do think entry testing, and by the same token, I think right now it may be practical to shorten quarantine, but in a setting where COVID is very rare and where vaccination has not reached everybody yet, entry testing may become even more important. I mean, if we could reset the clock, if we could go back to January and February, we would have loved to test every arriving person in Canada. We could have dramatically slowed this down, but of course that wasn't possible.
What do you say, though, to health officials here who have said entry testing isn't very useful because it's going to miss some people, and so the only way to deal with this is to put people into 2 weeks of quarantine?
Sure. I think if everybody perfectly complied with quarantine, if there were no downsides to that, that's a pretty useful way of managing this risk. It has worked reasonably well around the world. So I think one thing is if you identify it on entry, You might have to go back and ask, was anyone on that plane exposed? It tells you about what countries have a lot of activity. You may remember back in February, we were getting reports of Canadians arriving from, for example, Iran, and nobody knew that there was much COVID in Iran, and yet we had several cases in a row, and that may have been one of the ways that it got introduced into Canada. So I think arrival testing tells us activity. It may tell us that we need to do a look back on who was on that flight sometimes. It also tells us if that person is in quarantine, but let's say they're interacting with family members who didn't travel, well, we have to protect the family members. So it's useful in that way.
It's an interesting study, and I appreciate you taking the time to share some of those results with me.
You're very welcome.
So why isn't the province doing more entry testing? Well, today the Premier and the Chief Medical Officer of Health insisted it wouldn't be much help.
If you have people who aren't isolating away from their families, then yes, it does help them to inform. But everybody coming back to the province, with the exception of rotational workers, our isolation recommendations right now are that they do isolate away from families regardless. So if people are following the guidelines appropriately, then they already are isolating away from the people in their families or in their households. So I'm not sure of the value added in that situation.
Yeah, I think we all agree that we're trying to, and everyone across the country is trying to shorten the quarantine period from the 14 days to as low as we possibly can. And the added value of the point of entry versus the point of exit, I'm not sure is valuable at this particular moment in time.
Well, originally they were supposed to repeat the success of the summer and open up the streets, stop all the traffic. The city decided to change its mind. Store owners aren't that happy. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Here and Now. It wasn't that many months ago where this place was nice and warm. There were restaurants everywhere. And that was supposed to happen in a different kind of way come the winter. That has been canceled. City Hall has changed its mind. One person's not too thrilled with that among others. That's Peg Norman. She is the owner-operator of the Travel Bug and the Bee's Knees. So Peg, what did you make of that decision?
I was gobsmacked. It came out of nowhere. Nothing has changed with regards to the alert level that we're currently living under. So it just didn't make any sense.
The rationale for it was you had two councillors who were against it, but basically it was a pretty strong vote not to go ahead with the patios that we saw. You mentioned that we're sort of the same alert level we are right now. What about all of the facts? We see what's happening in Nova Scotia and all that. It was time for prudence. That doesn't sway you?
No, not at all, because what was going to happen for those 2 weekends in December was going to be very different than what happened during the summer when the weather was great. There are, as you can see, there are no patios on Water Street anymore. But nothing has changed with regards to our capacity in the stores. The restaurant capacity has stayed the same. So in fact, what it was going to do was going to shine a light once again on the downtown, encourage people to come down and do their Christmas shopping down here, while at the same time allowing people to freely access the street without having to negotiate, 6-foot wide sidewalks when there are, there's often lineups. So people are waiting outside, and so in fact, it would be a hell of a lot safer by having the street closed to vehicles for those weekends, because people wouldn't have to negotiate around cars and trucks and avoid people as they're walking up and down the sidewalk.
And there's also, we hear so much about following the best science, and outdoors, apparently, the disease does not spread the same way, so that would be another argument in your favor.
Yeah, I mean, the logic that they used, according to Mayor Breen, for canceling the weekend markets was that it would bring too many people down and have meant too many people inside. Well, that is not going to change. That has not changed. What it would do is shine a spotlight on downtown businesses and encourage people to come and basically keep us alive getting into next year until this is over. And I mean, for a lot of businesses downtown, a lot of businesses, period, they're hanging on by the skin of their teeth during this. And, it's unfortunate. The logic that they use to cancel it, by extension, why is the Avalon Mall open, or the Village Mall, or Costco, or Walmart? They're
because
inside.
it's always a busy time with people getting together and do their shopping.
And I'm not suggesting that we shut down any of those businesses, but the logic that was used, and it was done so quickly. The press conference was 11:30 on Monday morning to announce the closure of the Atlantic bubble for 2 weeks. No change in the alert level. And then at a 3 o'clock meeting, they had already decided, without any consultation with public health officials or consultation with any of the people whose livelihoods are depending on being able to make it through this winter. It is head scratching. I don't understand it. There are people making decisions for me, who I've worked really hard to establish these businesses, and for all of my employees. I've got to cut shifts because I had scheduled based on us being busier.
I appreciate your time and good luck. Let's hope that 2021 brings many better times.
Me too, and I encourage people, think about where you spend every dollar. If it's in your community, then that dollar stays in your community. And, shopping downtown is, I would argue, probably the safest place to shop right now.
Peg Norman, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Well, retailers in a Toronto neighborhood are also struggling to stay afloat in the pandemic. They've launched a campaign to stress the importance of shopping local, and it's turning heads. Talia Ricci explains.
The year is 2021, and these businesses along Queen West didn't make it.
We were totally worried. Some of our favorite places like Kennel Cafe, we saw that on their windows this morning, and we thought that they were gone.
That was the whole point of the Roncesvalles Not for Lease campaign, to paint a picture of what the future could look like if local shops aren't supported during these trying days of the pandemic.
We are asking our stores every month about, okay, how are things looking for you? How long can you last? And we're getting usually over 50% respondents saying, I've got weeks left, not months.
The BIA says the community has shown a lot of support, but still around half a dozen shops in Roncesvalles have already shut down, and others are in limbo. The owner of this tea shop says while she's been able to adapt and remain open, she worries for her neighbors deemed non-essential, as shops are closed once again during the citywide lockdown.
I think the fear is that the energy of the neighborhood will change, and that the community aspect of having a high street like this will impact the just the feeling of the neighborhood.
Even though these signs are hung up in Roncesvalles, those behind the campaign hope that this encourages people to shop local wherever they are.
We feel like it's a crisis that's happening across the city, that we have communities where this is unfortunately becoming the reality. People that live here, they employ people that live here, and they need the support of the government, and they also need the support of the local community.
The city says it's doing everything it can to help local businesses by promoting them, offering virtual support and grants. It says an extensive report that includes strategies to support the retail sector will be brought to a committee in 2021. But for now, businesses hope holiday shoppers don't forget them.
It's so much easier just to order on Amazon, but once you come and you see these people, you look into their in their livelihoods and everything, it's definitely just the right thing to do for sure.
They've bought all of their inventory, and I think most people, are ready to adapt and implement new systems.
Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
Welcome back. Want to correct an error early in the show. We reported that today's new COVID case is a woman on the West Coast in her 60s. She's actually in her 40s, so we wanted to set that straight.
Yeah, but now let's move on to a new series we're calling Far From Home, where we talk to Newfoundlanders and Labradorians living in other parts of the world.
And first up, Ireland. Jen White takes us to Dublin.
Chris and Larry, hi, how are you?
Hey Jen, how are you?
Hey Jen.
So you're living far away from home. Where are you guys originally from and where are you right now?
I was born and raised in Buren.
I'm from Mount Pearl.
And now I've been living in Dublin for the past 3.5 years.
What's it like being in Dublin?
It's been great living in Dublin. COVID life isn't as great. It's been a very boring year, I'm sure, for everyone around the world. But Ireland in particular has been quite strict on the rules. So we've largely been in lockdown since March. The biggest thing I'm still annoyed about is that pubs have never opened up. Pubs have been closed since March.
The few days before St. Patrick's Day, they closed. It was a sad way to start isolation.
Yeah, it was super hard. And to be honest, like Ireland without pubs is like Disneyland without Mickey Mouse. It is a big part of the culture here. It's a big part of the opportunity to be able to go and meet your friends, and it's been quite hard.
So let's talk a little bit more about that. What was it like that initial week when the changes came down?
So I was actually sick with COVID when it came down. I had a flu and I had a fever for a week. I had been to Belfast the weekend prior for a Pride event, and I'd been to a few clubs. And I came home and I was sick within 24 hours of coming home from Belfast. There wasn't enough testing to go around. It wasn't until afterwards that I was able to get an antibody test to prove that I had it before.
And so, Larry, did you get sick with it?
No. We live in a tiny studio. We're around each other all the time. If I was going to get it, it would have been while he had it. And so I'm very, very lucky that I haven't been sick.
So you guys went into lockdown and you're living in a studio apartment. How are you guys managing in such a small space?
Yeah, living in a small space during COVID, it definitely was a challenge at the beginning. We both work from home. We're on Zoom or Skype calls constantly. So it was at first one person in the bathroom or one person at the kitchen table. But in the end, we ended up we bought a little gazebo tent. It's like a 2 meter by 2 meter tent, and we put it in we have a little courtyard, and it's only about the same. The courtyard's about the same size as the tent in the front of the apartment, and we just kind of alternate using that tent sometimes throughout the day.
So let's talk about grocery shopping for a second. What's it like going out to the stores there?
At first, going to grocery stores when lockdown first started was a bit of madness. People were stocking up on essentials. There was lineups around the block, especially for more low-cost grocery stores. It was just insane. So you kind of had to pace yourself or time yourself when you went to the grocery store, and you made sure to pick up as much as you could. We started going to some smaller little kind of privately owned or kind of out of the way convenience stores and grocery stores because there wasn't many people. And
yeah, so basically we shopped at a Needs convenience store, basically. A Needs convenience store equivalent
yeah,
for 2 months.
Like a Marie's mini mart. It cost a little more as well, but we just felt it was worth the safety to shop kind of more local and at a smaller store.
So in terms of restrictions right now, what's it looking like in Dublin?
Since the end of October and going for 6 weeks at least, they've locked everything down again. Essential shops are the only things that are open. All shops are closed. Other than that, bars never were open. Restaurants are closed except for takeaway. You can only go 5 kilometers from your house. You can't have friends over. You can't visit anybody. So it kind of limits a lot of opportunities to do much of anything. You can kind of mainly go for a walk around the block. That's it. We subscribe to every single live streaming service as possible. Netflix, Amazon, everything. We are watching all the things. We just finished Downton Abbey. Yeah. So we're going strong. We're living based off of watching a lot of good shows.
How are you feeling these days? Are you homesick?
I think I'm always a little bit homesick. It's been 10 years that we've been living outside of Canada. and we both love home a lot. So most of our family is back there. So yeah, always kind of longing. It's being away from home. You always have one step on the rock.
At this point in time, we're spending all this time not doing anything, and we could be with our families or seeing our friends. Like, we could be spending time. So it just seems like a bit of time wasted.
So are you coming home anytime soon?
Yes, very excited to say. Yeah, we are. We're gonna if they let us into the country, we're gonna be back for the holidays.
Oh, great. So Christmas at home.
Yeah, no place like it.
So do you have any other last words, parting words for home? Anyone who's left on the rock?
Let us back in. Please let us back in to Newfoundland. Let us home for Christmas.
We just want to say to everyone back home that we miss you, that we know you've had a hard year. It's been in isolation. It's been hard for us being away, and that we can't wait to get home and see you all and celebrate.
Everyone's jealous of how well Newfoundland is doing during all of this, so keep up the good work. Wear your mask. Don't go to clubs or go to massive parties. And let us back in for Christmas. Thank you.
Well, somebody was listening, because right after that, Chris and Larry actually did make it back to Newfoundland.
Yes, they're currently isolating with no symptoms.
Well, just want to do a quick recap of the forecast tomorrow. Temperatures will be much nicer into the single digits. We'll see the chance of some flurries on the west coast in the first half of the day. That should clear out, and then we're going to hang on to the potential for some showers and drizzle in the east as we head into later on in the evening. But overall, quiet and calm up across the big land.
Nice.
Good.
Well, that's it for us tonight. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yep. Good night.
Good night.